What's up, guys? Ray Reinhardt's Chaos Astrologer. Today, for the record, is January 20th, 2020. I felt compelled in recent times to make a remix of some of my older educational videos on my YouTube channel, just for the sake of efficiency, making them shorter and sticking to the subject matter and not meandering as much. So that being said, I posted a video about the event going on at the Virginia gun rally today in Richmond, Virginia. And one of the questions that was posed in my comments was, why do I use equal houses? I did make a video about Astrology House System 101, doing a side-by-side comparison of equal houses versus Placidus, and I'm going to elaborate on that again, make this a little shorter, and get to my point. So there are multiple different kinds of house systems that you can use in astrology. There's more than I can count, and I don't use them all. It's a subjective tool. People are welcome to use whichever systems they want. Obviously, all the systems have their own pros and cons, and you just find what works for you. So the ones that work for me, I stick to just 3 to cover my bases and answer most of my questions, and give me any of the insights I want to know. I use Placidus, which most people do. That's the modern way of graphing charts. And I use equal houses. And then when all else fails, if I don't have all the details for a chart, I use sun sign equal houses. So I'm going to go over what those are. So when we're looking at Placidus, that's what everybody's accustomed to. That's a modern way to graph out charts. It has a lot of variables to it. It's about specifics. It's the modern way. It's easier for people to overlook the complexities of Placidus because we have the modern amenities of apps and software that graph out our charts, which is totally different from back in the day in medieval times, or even in ancient times, where they had to do it by hand and look at the stars with their bare eyes and calculate different angles and all that stuff with the planets. So the benefits of using Placidus is primarily it reveals a lot of the personality details with that. It's egocentric, focused on the person, and the complex variables within the person's nature, lifestyle, personality, that sort of thing. It kind of elaborates on who they are as opposed to what their life is going to be about. And so I use Placidus primarily for natal chart astrology, synastry, and that astropsychology. If I'm trying to get in the head of somebody or understand their behavior or be able to explain kind of personality, profiles, I will use Placidus. Then for equal houses is a medieval technique. It's pretty cut and dry. It's been used for predictive astrology for, hundreds if not thousands of years. And it is the best used to predict events and trends because it's cut and dry. So the difference between equal and Placidus is that Placidus will often share co-rulership of certain houses with multiple signs. So, for example, if we're looking at the ascendant, if we were going to have Aries on the ascendant for the equal houses, Aries will be the ruler of the first house, and any of the planets that are in Aries will be in the first house. When we're looking at Placidus, and Aries is on the ascendant, say that Pisces actually ingresses over the cusp of the first house. Technically, the house ruler for the first house would be Pisces. There would still be some planets in Pisces that are in the earlier degrees of Pisces that would be in the 12th house, even though Pisces also rules the first house. So it could potentially have planets or points that are in Pisces as well as Aries for the first house when we're looking at Placidus. So it's not as cut and dry. There's variables, and the translation is not as black and white, more or less. Obviously, black and white, when looking at people's personalities and dynamic and stuff like that and strengths, is not necessarily beneficial per se. Hence why I don't use equal houses with natal astrology or anything like that. I'll use it for transits, progressions, Hori astrology, and calculating trends and events. So if you're going to do some, some history and astrological research, and you want to see signatures and aspects that are common for the start of like wars or some sort of battles going on, then you would go and look at like World War One, World War Two, and like the Vietnam War, and calculate when these wars actually started, and then you'll see a common theme when using the equal houses. So using that actual analogy or example goes into my fail-safe for my last chart method that I use. What if you don't have the time, or even close to an accurate timestamp for a chart? Because that's a common thing that happens a lot. For example, if we were going to do this research on wars, I'm not going to have a timestamp for the moment that the Vietnam War started. World War II could, essentially you could use the bombing of Pearl Harbor as the moment, which I have, but in some cases there's not enough data for you to make a chart with time, and there's just too much potential errors if you're going to guess, that sort of thing. So what I do if I don't have a timestamp, I'll still use the equal house system, but I'll use sun sign astrology. So that's putting 0 degrees of Aries on the ascendant. So the pros and cons with that is that the aspects and the dignities of the planets will still reveal a lot of details. So if there's major aspect patterns between planets, regardless of what house starts on the ascendant, those aspects will still be evident or be visual in the chart itself. The dignities of the planets, meaning the signs that they're in, won't change either. So the dignities kind of elaborate on how effective the planet energy is manifesting, and then the aspects itself kind of relay any synchronistic events or trends that will transpire. The difference between if you don't have the time and you do would be details on how certain planets are focused in certain houses. So for example, if we were going to look at a chart and if we were going to look at a chart and say that Pluto is in the 4th house for the chart when we have the time, there would be some sort of transformation or volatility going on within the home primarily. But if we were going to say, hey, we don't have the timestamp for that, we start at 0 degrees of Aries for the sun sign, and with Pluto being in the sign of Capricorn right now, it wouldn't put Pluto in the 4th house, it would put Pluto technically in the 10th house, which is the house that Capricorn rules. So the details or information you would get from having a particular planet dwelling in certain houses would not be available to you if you don't have the time. That's why times are very important. That's another layer of information that is very useful when examining charts and trends and that sort of thing. But like I said, I use that as a last resort if I still want to take a look at something but I don't have any accurate timestamps for that. So that being said, recap, I use Placidus for natal synastry and personality and astropsychology, and I use equal houses for predicting events, transits, progressions, and astrology. And the sun sign stuff is just a fail-safe when you don't have timestamps. Yeah. If you have any further questions, feel free to comment below. If you use any other kind of house systems other than I do, feel free to share and tell me why you use them. Maybe I might be interested in, opening up to other potential chart methods. Who knows? Alright, bye guys.